What is up, YouTube? It's Roy Millzy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for another episode of Personal Brews, the show where I try to brew a deck for myself, and I bring you guys along for the ride on my quest to out-brew your favorite Magic channel. If that's something that interests you, drop me a like on this video, subscribe if you want to be a part of that. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this video today. I feel like we're approaching the inevitable. This is a deck that probably was going to get built eventually. I've tried it out once or twice, and each time I played it, I said, wow, this deck feels good, but this is not necessarily the level of comboing with a slice of bread that I wanted from a deck. But I think in a lot of ways, lately I've been pushing myself to brew new things, try new things, and just try to find decks that really interest me. And I keep revolving around this black-green sacrifice, Jund sacrifice kind of realm. And every time I approach this realm, whether it be the treasures angle or the sacrifice angle, there is one dragon that I keep coming back to. It's a dragon that I compare every Jund commander I see to. It's a dragon that in a lot of ways exemplifies sacrifice to me, and it's very hard to just not lean in when everything you brew, you're just like, man, would this be better if we let this guy head it up? And that is Korvold Fae-Cursed King. 2 black, red, green for a 4/4 dragon noble with flying. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, sacrifice another permanent. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Korvold and draw a card. And I love the flavor text in this one. I don't normally talk about it, but I think it's funny. Transformed at his own wedding, he promptly ate the banquet, the gifts, and the guests. All right. Jund sacrifice. I know there's going to be people out here who are going to go, Millzy, please don't just copy paste this list. You just, there's going to be people out there who are already going to say that. I get it. Korvold's one of these commanders that, like, everybody and their grandmother has touched Korvold and brewed Korvold. I get it. I 100% I get it. Okay. But my thing was, I wanted to try to make this deck both what I want from it and while still trying to combo with a literal slice of bread. I don't know. Jund decks have always been something that really interests me. I've been wanting to build a Jund deck for a really long time. And there's a couple cards in this deck that really stand out to me as cards that I've just been wanting to use, but I haven't had the privilege to use yet. So we'll talk about those cards as we go. Mana base, I don't think there's anything groundbreaking here. We got our 3 colors. We got things like Lotus Field, River Tears, Outlook, that sacrifice things when they come in or sacrifice themselves. What that does is it gives us another Korvold trigger to do things. Same thing with Fatal Passage, right? They give us a sacrifice trigger, which will allow us to draw and go get those lands. I really like Treasure Vault because it can make us some more treasures, and we have lots of ways to game those treasures in this deck. So we can turn land into lots of treasures if need be. Getting up into the enchantments. Getting into the enchantments is where we need to talk about one of our first big ways to go, I wouldn't say infinite, but definitely start having some fun, and that's Whip Silk and Crown of Flames. These are 2 enchantments of a very similar effect. For 1 mana, they enchant a creature, and then for 1 mana, you bring them back to their hand. And someone's going to go, okay, but what does that accomplish us? Well, what that accomplishes us is with something like Goldspan Dragon. Goldspan Dragon says, whenever it becomes the target of a spell, we create a treasure, and then we can sack treasures for 2 mana instead of 1. So what basically happens here is with either of these, we need to start with Goldspan Dragon, preferably some way to deal damage to our opponent when we're sacrificing the treasures, because that's what we're going to be doing here. And then one of the 2 of these other 2 in our hand. We're going to pay the 1 mana, target Goldspan. Goldspan's going to make us a treasure because we're targeting it with a spell. Then the aura goes on. We sacrifice that treasure for that 2 mana. Hopefully this triggers something that's going down on our board to damage our opponents. We get 2 mana. One of it's going to be used to return that back to our hand, and then that second mana is going to be used to cast it again, targeting Goldspan Dragon, thus creating a loop. Now there's lots of things in our deck we can use to deal damage based on that. You have Mayhem Devil, you have Marionette Master. There's plenty of things, but the goal there is hopefully find something that pairs with this. If we see this line being created, and do it that way. We have the infinite turns or the infinite combats route with aggravated assault. We have Bear Umbra. We have Reaver Cleaver, which gets us treasures whenever a creature deals damage to our opponent, and it has trample. This is great on Korvold because Korvold just gets big enough that either we end the game with commander damage or we just start nuking treasures. And we also have Old Gnawbone, which is going to make those treasures as well. Angel of the Iron Throne, another one of those cards where we can use to take advantage of sacrificing all those treasures or creatures. Bash Remembrance is going to trigger off of us losing or sacrificing our creatures. Again, Bear Umbra pairs with Ag Assault or can just be put on a creature and untap all of our lands, whatever it attacks. Exploration allows us to get a couple extra land drops. Reign of Riches, another card that I love in these treasure lists. When it comes in, we get 2 treasures, and then first spell we cast each turn that has mana from a treasure was spent to cast has Cascade. This is great because Korvold's already netting us value anytime we sacrifice a treasure, right? By giving itself a counter and drawing us card because we're sacrificing a permanent. Why not get added value above that? Revel in Riches, another way for us potentially to win because we can get rid of our opponent's creatures or just stack up treasures and potentially win on our upkeep if that's the way we want to do it. Rhythm of the Wild to give our things haste or +1/+1 counter, but also kind of stop our things from getting countered or creature spells. Sylvan Library for that extra draw at the start of the turn. Okay, getting into the artifacts. So you're going to notice we have a couple of these pretty big sack outlets, and that's because with certain combinations of creatures, we can just every time we get rid of a creature, we're going to get another creature plus something else, or we're going to be able to sacrifice something for value or get enough of certain things that we can just continue sacrificing creatures. So we've Altered Dimension. This can mill our opponents out with certain creature combinations. Ashnod's Altar can get us 2 mana for each creature we sacrifice. Phyrexian Mana Altar can get us 1 mana of any color for each creature we sacrifice. The big one of the big artifacts that kind of goes with these guys to really combo with Korvold is Animation Module. It says whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a permanent user, you may pay 1. If you do, make a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So this pairs with Phyrexian Altar and Ashnod's Altar, and all we would need is 1 other creature token. We would sacrifice that creature token to Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Altar, either getting 2 colorless or 1 colorless. We would get a Korvold trigger we'd get a Korvold trigger, putting a +1/+1 counter on it and drawing a card. Then Animation Module would make us, by paying 1, we could make a servo and we could repeat that process. Again, we don't really want to do this without something that's damaging our opponents, Bash Remembrance, Agent of the Iron Throne, those kind of things, because eventually we're just going to draw our deck and we don't want to do that. What we basically want to do is basically get ourselves to a combo position where we have all the things necessary and we only need to do this a few times to just drain our opponents out, right? And do that way. So this is a combo we got to be a little bit careful of because we don't want to just draw our deck out of nowhere unless we have a active payoff that's allowing us to kind of damage our opponents and win the game with that active payoff. Arcane Signet, Crypt, Soul Ring for mana, Conduit of Worlds, I think is just going to help us in case things get removed, getting things out of our graveyard. It's also going to let us play lands from our graveyard, but I'm a little bit more intrigued at the getting things back if necessary. Bootlegger's Stash, letting all of our lands tap to make treasures. This is great with Korvold because anytime we sacrifice something, we get a +1/+1 counter and draw a card, right? So it literally turns all of our lands into Korvold triggers, and that's just going to push us even further forward. Bootlegger's Stash is a card that so many people freaked out about it and ended up not becoming that big of an issue outside of the decks that could already abuse it, Chatterfang, Korvold, things like that. But again, I think this card was literally made for this deck, and anytime we can, if we have Goldspan Dragon out, Bootlegger's Stash becomes even better because now our treasures are tapped or sacrificing for 2 mana, not just 1. So I like Bootlegger's Stash. I think it fits really well here. And then we talked about the Cleaver being a way for us to help kind of in the game. Okay. At the end of the day, we're playing a combo deck in all reality. So we're going to need a few tutors to do that. Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Intent, Imperial Seal, Vamp, and Worldly Tutor. Again, the goal here is to get the things we need into our hand. Some of these combos require creatures, some of them require artifacts, so we want to split the amount of the tutors we have. That's why I'm playing the Worldly Tutor, because, again, we have enough creatures that are involved in these combos where getting the creature is still important. Assassin's Trophy, Deadly Rollick and Beast Within for removal. Dark Ritual can help us get down Korvold a little bit sooner if that's what we want to do. Deadly Dispute can draw some cards, get us a treasure, and proc Korvold. Saw in Half is such a fun card. Just we can destroy target creature, and then if that creature dies this way, its controller creates 2 tokens that are copy of that creature, except their base power and toughness is half that power toughness round up each time. Saw in Half has so many great targets in this deck. Avenger of Zendikar makes a ton of tokens when it comes in. We could Saw in Half Goldspan and allow our and get us 2 ways to make just 2 attackers or to get more treasures. That way, we could Saw in Half Pitiless Plunderer and kind of rush ourselves forward on this making treasures when things die plan. I think there's so many great targets. I think Avenger of Zendikar is the best target, though, because it makes tokens right when it comes in. The interesting thing about this is you could Saw in Half Scoot Swarm if you wanted to, and you just get two completely the same Scoot Swarms. So that's another way to do that. If that's what you wanted to do. Ramp, Cultivate, Farseek into the North, Nature's Lore, Ramp, and Growth 3 visits for our standard ramp. Jessica's Will, Red Staple, and Mana helps us, probably going to help us out on some turns. Seize the Spoils, just a little bit more of this draw. Pitch a card, draw 2, create a treasure. I thought about running the big score and Unexpected Windfall over Seize the Spoils, but I just wanted to try to diversify just a teeny bit on what we were playing. Blossom Sack for some board wipe. Torment of Hellfire as a finisher. If we have enough treasures, this could potentially end the game. You pick an arbitrarily large number for X, and most of your opponents won't have enough non-land permanents or cards to survive after they pitch them all away. So decent spell base. Again, I think I might find the more you play the deck, the more you need more of these straight up finishers. If you just have a big turn where you make a ton of mana, maybe it's worth adding Jai Simulating Inferno, or maybe it's worth adding Exsanguinate. You know, those would be the questions we see as we play the deck and learn it a bunch more. All right, for the creatures, every creature in the deck either pays off something dying, gives us a tokens or a resource, is a sacrifice outlet, or plenty more. Arius says you can sacrifice it. It does damage equal to its power to target creature with flying. And then it says it has persist, meaning when this creature is put into a graveyard from play, if it had no +1/+1, -1/-1 counters on it, return it with a -1/-1 counter on it. This pairs with things like Grumgully and Rhythm of the Wild that say whenever a creature comes in, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. That +1 and -1 counter will cancel each other out, meaning Arius will always come back. This is then something we can pair with something that looks at things dying, and a sacrifice thing like Ashnod's Altar or Phyrexian Altar, or anything like the or Altar of Dementia, and basically mill or damage our opponents out with it. So this is basically a combo piece. Ancient Copper Dragon going to get us all those treasures. It's a big flyer in the air. AOZ coming in, making all those tokens, and then potentially making those tokens pretty big. Carrion Feeder is a sack outlet because it allows sack creature to put a counter on it. But it also could get big enough where it becomes relevant in combat. Shatterfang, one of the most popular commanders for sacrifice in its own right, going to allow us to make squirrels along with the other tokens that we make. This pairs really well with Pitiless Plunder and a lot of other things for combos in this deck. So I think it more than fits its spot. Dockside getting us all those treasures when it comes in, hopefully. And we're pairing it with Temur Sabertooth, so that as long as we have enough mana, we need to have at least, if our opponents have at least 4, if we make at least 4 treasures, we can return it back to our hand and play it again, and go that way. So interesting. The other good thing about that is with Korvold, that could be 4 treasure sacrifices that we would then draw off of, that we would get things set up. So this is an interesting little combo. We talked about Goldspan. Grumgully, whenever another non-human creature, each other non-human creature you control enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. This is what pairs with that Arius, but it's just going to help the rest of our creatures as well come in as a little bit bigger. Mahadi, at the beginning of your end step, create a treasure token for each creature that died this turn. The fun thing that we can do is if we do go infinite enough, let's say we do these loops where we're sacrificing creatures and getting value, and then we finally find let's say we finally find a Bastion of Remembrance, or we finally find an Agent of the Iron Throne. Bastion's a bad call here. But let's say we finally find Agent the Iron Throne, or we finally find something that deals damage when we sacrifice treasures. And then we go to our end step and we, had 50 creatures that died this turn. Mahadi makes us 50 treasures. We immediately sacrifice those 50 treasures, and maybe we can damage out our opponents. The only thing to be careful with Mahadi is, and anytime we're sacrificing treasures, is Korvold is now May on drawing. So we need to be a little bit careful that we don't just deck ourselves by sacrificing too many things and drawing too many things. Baronet Master, one of my favorite ways that hopefully we can finish the game on out. It could come in and make itself a 4/6 with Fabricate, and then whenever an artifact is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to its power. This is one of those great ones for sacrificing all those treasures. Making your opponent lose 4 life at a time is going to end the game fairly quickly. Mayhem Devil, whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, deals 1 damage to any target, and anyone sacrificing triggers it. So I think Mayhem Devil works pretty well as far as that goes, as far as hurting our opponents along the way. Old Nabo, whenever a creature we control deals combat damage to a player, we get that many treasures. This is going to help us push forward on those big turns, drawing into our pieces that we need. Pit of Splendor, whenever another creature you control dies, we get a treasure. Again, this is something we're already trying to do anyway. We're already trying to sacrifice our own things, so I think Pit of Splendor is going to make that pretty good and allow us. And this is another one of our combo pieces with some other things. Professional Facebreaker, whenever one of our creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, we create a treasure. Then we can sacrifice a treasure to exile the top card and play that card this turn. Professional Facebreaker is probably one of the creatures in the deck I'm the least high on, because I think we have so many things that allow us to get treasures anyway. Maybe this needs to come out for another way to deal our to either deal damage to our opponents when things come in or when we sacrifice things. So again, this is some room for the testing to teach me a lot on this one. Prosh, whenever it comes in, we make creature tokens where X is the amount of mana spent to cast Prosh, which is going to be 6 most of the time because of course it's not our commander. And then we can sack another creature to give it +1/+0. That way, Scoot Swarm, making those 1/1s when a land comes in, or once we have enough lands, making copies of itself. We talked about the Sabertooth with Dockside. The other good thing about Sabertooth's ability is if we need to protect a creature, we can just bounce it back to our hand. Like if someone's trying to take out Korvold and we really need it, we could just bounce Korvold back to our hand, or any one of these creatures. Tender Shoot Dryad's going to get us a sapling on everyone's turn, and then as soon as we have a City's Blessing, so as long as we have 10 or more permanents, they all get +2/+2. For the rest, so that's great, because now they're becoming 3/3s, and now we potentially might just win the game with enough tokens. We might just win the game with combat potentially. Tireless Provisioner, whenever a land comes in, we get a food or a treasure. Again, the more treasures we get, the more draws we get, and the further we go towards finding any of our combos and winning the game. Zorn, if one or more treasure tokens would be created instead, create an additional one. This is great, right? Because again, we want the treasures, we want to do things with them. Ziatora, the dragon from Capenna that I thought might take Korvold's place in trying to find a deck built around it, but I think the more that I looked at Ziatora, the more that I realized I think it just belongs in Korvold. Beginning your end step, you can sacrifice another creature. When you do, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasures. I mean, you don't particularly care what you do with it. This could be a way for you to just sacrifice Korvold and just dome someone for a ton of damage at the end of your turn. I think there's a lot of different ways you could take Ziatora, but it's a big body. It has an ability that does pretty well. And I just think in general, it's just going to hurt either people over time, or towards the end of your turn, you could just sacrifice a very big Korvold or a very big Prosh, or a very big carrion feeder, and just dome someone for a ton of damage. So I like Ziatora. And Zulaport Cutthroat, another one of our sack outlets, or not sack outlets, another one of our sack and beneficiaries. Whenever it or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. I think this is where this is one of those probably effects that we need a couple more of. Not just for creatures, but for artifacts as well. So again, I think that's where this deck can get better, is kind of tweaking those dials on what you have as far as combo enablers, combo finishers, just damage dealers. I think there's a lot of things we can kind of twist the knobs on and figure out what works and what doesn't. But again, most of my brain tells me there's no way to know that until we physically sit down with the deck and give it a shot. Does it run its pace as well? Does it figure out how to finish the game? Or do we need to kind of inject a few more of these little Cutthroat style effects, or some more of these kind of sacrifice creatures, get creatures back, go infinite type play lines. I don't know yet. Again, I've only played Korvold once or twice, so a lot of my experience hasn't really seen me be able to put it through the paces that I want to see it put through. And so I would rather take the gut shot at the start and figure out if it needs more of it, than not. And maybe after a couple times, I realize, we need more of these go infinite sacrificing creature type combos to damage our opponents out. And if that's the case, well then, okay, we can look into more of those cards and kind of fit them into slots that maybe aren't necessarily needed. I could also really see something like Reckless Fireweaver or Ingenious Artificer, these things that would pair with this Goldspan line or a bunch of these treasures that we're creating. I think those could fit as well. And maybe it's just about, if we think that over the times that we're testing it, we really see those play lines become really prevalent, then we just bring those things in and allow us to take advantage of them. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments about Korvold. I mean, I know everyone in their grandmother's built a Korvold deck, but I'm excited to try it out. Again, there's some of the cards in this deck that I've been really wanting to use. Chatterfang, Pitiless Plunderer, these cards that they seem really fun, but I've yet to just find a list that I really like for them yet. And this list seems perfect. It plays a lot of the things that I like already, but just does it in a little bit different way. So what do you think down with Korvold? Down in the comments, and I will catch you guys next time.